concern over the U.S.-European partnership, saying that Europe cannot fully rely on the U.S. with Trump as president. Tough words. Here to discuss, Nile Gardiner and Ron Meyer. Nile, she suggested this once before, and some of the aides came in afterward and said, no, that it was misconstrued. Apparently, Angela Merkel is sort of somehow vying for leadership of the Western world, as she sincerely believes we are no longer an ally of Germany or Europe.
Yeah, fighting talk from Angela Merkel, and also you see similar talk from Emmanuel Macron as well. And, the reality is that both Germany and France are declining powers. Even within Europe, German and French power is in decline. As we saw today in Poland with President Trump's speech there, you have rising nations in Eastern and Central Europe who are now challenging French and German domination within the European Union. The British, of course, are leaving the EU, thankfully, and getting off that sinking ship. But the reality is that Germany's economy is in relative decline. Germany is a country, I think, that still harbors a lot of deep-seated anti-American sentiment. Angela Merkel projects that time after time with her comments about Donald Trump. And without a doubt, I think you do have a clash of competing ideologies here. Merkel, Macron are sort of liberal internationalists. They are, believers in big government.
Right.
They have a very different ideological outlook to that of President Trump, who espouses really the national interest, self-determination, national sovereignty. These are all very powerful forces that President Trump is projecting, the opposite, I think, of where Angela Merkel is.
Ron, here's the interesting thing. We began the morning very early on with the EU inking a major trade deal with Japan, which it felt like a sort of, it certainly was designed to send a message to President Trump. And their message is, hey, we still believe in quote unquote free trade agreements. But we also understand, to Niall's point, that the EU was designed because these are declining economies, and they figured if we all linked up together, maybe the decline would go slower. But make no mistake, they're no longer the powerhouse that they were 50 or 100 years ago.
I mean, pretending like a trade deal with Japan is some big thing is kind of a joke, in my opinion. I mean, Japan's about the easiest trade partner you could ever have because they have a real market you can sell to, and they also have high-quality goods you want to buy. If you don't want to do a trade deal with them, I don't know who you are. I'm sure Trump would do a trade deal with Japan. I'm sure anyone would do a trade deal with Japan. Charles, I'm sure you would do a personal trade deal with Japan. This is what this is about? It's not about global leadership for Merkel. It's not even about European leadership for Merkel. The truth is she has an election coming up in September. The truth is that she's being challenged to the left, and so in order to make people in her country who are center-left happy with her, she's taking on Donald Trump. It's not about global leadership. It's not about European leadership. It's about her own power and her own election in Germany. That's the way I see it.
Well, Niall, on that note, coming into the year, felt like this wave of Brexit, President Trump, was going to continue throughout Europe, and maybe you would have seen the Netherlands and France, and even this surprise election that Theresa May called and wasn't necessarily so successful at. Has that tide of sort of individualism, populism, has it died down in Western Europe? We saw it on full display in Poland. The Polish people want to embrace it, but what about the cultural elites of France and Germany?
I think, Charles, that Brexit is an immensely powerful force. It's going to take many years for the full impact of Brexit to be felt across Europe, and I'm sure that many other countries over the course of the next decade, the next 2 decades, will follow Britain's lead and exit the European Union. And after all, Brexit is about the principles of self-determination and national sovereignty. Incredibly powerful forces here. And I think that already you're seeing, for example, the Polish government now challenging the power of Brussels, challenging Berlin and Paris. And also Polish leaders now calling for fundamental change within the European Union.
Right.
And in response, of course, the EU, especially the Germans and the French, trying to bully the Poles. And that kind of bullying, I think, is no longer flying in Europe. And so I think you are seeing a challenge to the European project.
Guys, we got to leave it there. Thank you both very much. Next, President Trump declaring today that big government is toxic and that what the world really needs, again, is what we talked about, the return to individualism and to preserve culture, particularly Western culture. We'll talk about that next.